Welcome to Podcetera. Each episode is a journey of discovery as we delve into topics that pique our curiosity and yours. We feature in-depth interviews with fascinating individuals who have extraordinary stories to share.
I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. And this
is Podcetera. Siobhan Mondesire, welcome to Podcetera.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I love bringing my worlds together. Joelle, who I've known for a very long time. I've also known you for a chunk of time, not as long, but I love bringing the people that I know and love together. So I'm excited for you two to have a conversation today, get to know each other.
I'm looking forward to it.
I know you, but I don't know a lot about your background. So tell us about yourself, your background. I'd like to know about you.
I am a first-generation Canadian. My mom is from Scotland, and she came here when she was around 18. And my dad is from the West Indies and came here when he was around 13. And they met each other, fell in love, and started a little family in Oshawa, Ontario. So I grew up most of my life there, and then we moved to Ancaster. And then after that, I started going to university at McMaster. I started out as an English major, and my goal was to work for Cosmo magazine. That was like the dream. I was completely obsessed with Cosmo. I did an internship for an online women's magazine. So I would write about dating and relationships and interview therapists about who should pay on the first date or who should make the first move. So I was very immersed in that. I also did a few internships with an online sports editorial where I interviewed professional athletes as well, which was really, really cool. I got to interview Craig McMorris. I met Cujo Joseph from the Toronto Maple Leafs and Trevor Linden as well from the Canucks. So that was really interesting. And that was the path that I wanted to go down. My first job out of university was actually working for a marketing agency as a content writer. And so I managed all of the interns and our blog strategy. And then after that, it just kind of clicked for me, marketing. I just really got interested in it. And that's when my career kind of took off with marketing. Prior to that, I was also an athlete. I played soccer, and I actually had a scholarship to Virginia to play soccer, which I turned down and decided to focus on staying home. My parents promised me a puppy if I didn't go away for school. So I took the puppy instead of leaving home. And so that's kind of how I stayed in Canada and built my career and my life there. I have a 6.5-year-old son named Archie, who is the love of my life. He means everything to me. And moved to the West Coast to just give him a life full of adventure. That was really important to us. So we live on Vancouver Island, and we spend our days hiking and going to the beach and whale watching. So it's a pretty good life.
Since you just started a podcast, I'd like you to tell us why you decided to start one and what it's about.
The podcast is called Give Me Lemons. And the idea behind it is that often in life, when we face adversity or, bad things happen, people always tell you to find a silver lining, or they tell you to make lemonade out of lemons. And I myself am a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 2023 with stage 4 follicular non-Hodgkins lymphoma, which is a chronic cancer. There's currently no cure for that. And so I didn't want to hear people tell me that everything happens for a reason anymore. Because what is the point of getting cancer? What's the point of kids getting illnesses or bad things happening in the world? There is no silver lining to that. And I really wanted a podcast that said, hey, shitty things happen, and we can acknowledge that, and we can sit in the darkness together and feel those feelings, but it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't mean just because something shitty happens to you that you have to be a shitty person. And you can go on to do good things in the world. And when I speak about good things, it doesn't mean I started a business or I became a billionaire or now I'm famous because I turned this horrible thing into something great. Sometimes just surviving and continuing with life is enough. Getting up is enough. And that's enough to celebrate. And that's what I'm hoping to do with Give Me Lemons.
Since you mentioned your cancer diagnosis, I would like you to tell us about that diagnosis and the journey. What was the lead up to you getting diagnosed?
And
What
that's
were
what
your symptoms? How did you discover that you had cancer?
for 6 years, I had symptoms. And I went to 4 different doctors, and I was given various diagnoses for that, for my symptoms. So one doctor told me it was because of my weight and that I should focus on eating healthier. Another doctor told me that it's just my anxiety, it's in my head, and I needed to go on anxiety medication. Another told me that I should get my partner checked out because potentially he was cheating on me, and that's where my symptoms were coming from. And another doctor just said, this is just the way your body is, and you have to get used to it.
That's a ton of gaslighting right there.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
So, for context, my cancer, even though it's a blood cancer, started in my cervix. So, I think, and I guess don't quote me on this, but it's about a 0.04% of this type of cancer starts in the reproductive organs, where mine did start. So, a lot of my symptoms were similar to just reproductive challenges that people would have. So, not being able to get pregnant, even though we were trying, and just having a lot of discomfort and living life feeling uncomfortable constantly, and then being gaslit that there was nothing wrong with me.
I can commiserate on the gaslighting. I can't imagine how frustrating it was to go again and again to the doctor. How did you make it through years of that?
Honestly, I thought I was crazy. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was crazy. And there was nothing wrong. People were telling me over and over again, you're fine. You're 27, you're 28. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just in your head. And then I started to doubt myself constantly. I never believed myself. I never believed my body. I told myself, it's just in your head. You're being crazy, because that's what the professionals were telling me.
If you're okay with it, I'd like to take you back to the day when a doctor finally figured it out and you were given that news. You're not the same person anymore once you have a diagnosis like that. So can you take us through that day and what was going through your head and how you were feeling?
That day, I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing a green button-down corduroy shirt, and I sat in the doctor's office, and he came in and he told me that there's a really strong chance that this is going to be cancer. And the type of cancer that they originally thought that it was like a 1 in 1,000 cases, but it was also one that was extremely aggressive and did not have a good prognosis. I spent a lot of time crying. I remember walking out to my car, getting in. My husband and my son were waiting in the car, and I was just sobbing. And to this day, I still have that shirt hanging in my closet, and I've never worn it again. It's been almost 2 years. I would love to cut it up or burn it or something, but it just sits there as a reminder for me. And it was a really difficult day, because after that day, it still took me 5 more months for them to figure out what type of cancer it was. So I went through multiple biopsies, multiple tests. And then 5 months later, on April 3rd, I finally got the call where they said, okay, we know exactly what type of cancer it is and where it is in your body. So although it started in my cervix, I had an 8-centimeter mass that was growing out of my cervix. It also spread to my lymph nodes in my abdomen, and my left kidney was also involved. They were pretty quick to get me into chemotherapy because I was in stage 3 kidney failure at the time.
You did not in any way signal that you were going through this at work. I want to say how strong you are and how unbelievably impressed I am. I probably would have been a mess.
I was a mess. You make me cry. It was a mess. But I didn't want that to affect the people around me. And I still wanted to be a strong leader for them. So yeah, I just kind of kept it in.
What were some of the most challenging physical or emotional symptoms you face post chemo that others might not realize that you're still dealing with?
That's a great question. There's a lot. And the type of chemotherapy that I went through is called bendamustine. I also did immunotherapy, and I'm still currently in active treatment doing immunotherapy. So I will say that the type of treatment that I did, my chemo, is not the same as other types of chemo that we traditionally see on like television. So you traditionally see the people who, are losing all their hair, their eyebrows. They've got what we sometimes call like moon phase. And there's like this stereotype of what it looks like to have cancer. And the type of treatment that I did was less toxic than that treatment. And therefore, I didn't have all the same symptoms, didn't look like a typical cancer patient to other people, which made it really difficult because that's an invisible illness that I'm going through, where everyone said, "You looked great," but I felt horrible. I still suffer now. I've been a year out of treatment and I still suffer from brain fog. So we sometimes call it chemo brain. And I don't remember words. My short term memory is pretty bad. I can have conversations with my friends. And then the next day I'll be like, "What did we talk about? Were you going away today? I can't remember." So it's really difficult for me to retain information. So I'm often writing notes constantly because that's the only way that I can remember things. I'm physically exhausted all the time. And a lot of the time, people think I'm being lazy, but it's just because I'm really tired. I lean a lot on things. Like I won't stand up, I'll just lean, or I'll always try to find a place to sit down. Sometimes I just don't have the energy to do things like go for a walk. Or if I do go for a walk, that's it for the day. That is all I can do for the rest of the day. And sometimes I feel a lot of guilt about that, especially having a young child, because I feel like I'm being lazy, but I'm just physically exhausted.
Who or what has been your biggest source of support throughout your journey, and how have they helped you stay so strong?
I think I have a few different people I would like to call out. Obviously, my son, he is my main motivation. He's the best kid. I know I'm biased because he's mine, but he is the best kid in the world. And he finds joy in everything. He even finds joy in, when I was going through treatment because if I was in bed, he'd be like, "Oh, yes, we get to watch YouTube together," because that was the only time he was allowed to watch YouTube was if mommy was doing chemo. So he'd be like, "Is it a chemo day today? So we could watch YouTube." So that always made me laugh. Obviously, my husband as well has just been a total and complete rock for me. My mom flew out every single round of chemo and stayed with us for 2 weeks to help take care of me. She would massage my feet. She would make sure I was eating well. She would make sure I was drinking water and just providing that extra support for my partner as well. Because often with illnesses, we forget about the caregivers and what they're going through. And it's a lot to watch the person you love in this world going through that. It's really hard on them mentally. And they often don't say anything because they don't want to add to the burden already that you're experiencing. They don't want you to feel guilty for, making their life a little more difficult. They would never say that, but it is. It's harder for them. And that's okay to say. I also leaned into a lot of support groups. So I found Lymphoma Ladies, which is a social media group. We found each other on Instagram. We would do weekly meetings Wednesdays. It's all women with lymphoma. They do meetups as well. So they've met up in California, they've met up in New York, they've met up in Texas, and all these different places. And it's just women that I can talk to from all over the world who are experiencing the exact same things as me, which is really unique. And you can be 100% authentic because they get it. I also work with a group as well that I meet with called YAC, which is Young Adult Cancer Canada, another support group. And this one is all Canadian young adults, so people under the age of 40 who have a cancer diagnosis. And they have weekly meetings, multiple meetings for all different topics. They have topics for the LGBTQ2A plus community. They have for parents. They have people going to school, any topic you can think of. And you just get to meet more people that are just like you.
I don't know if this is too personal or not. If it is, then you don't have to answer. I was wondering if there were complications having your son, or did this come after?
There were complications, but we didn't realize it at the time. My partner and I have been together for over a decade. We've only been pregnant one time, and that was with our son. So we call him our little miracle. And we have been trying up until I was diagnosed. So that would have been about 5 or 6 years, trying to have another child. And it just wasn't happening for us, which was really disheartening, especially to find out that it's because of cancer.
What factors did you consider when you decided whether and when to disclose your illness to colleagues or to your manager or to the business? And how did it go?
I think what opened the door for me to have the conversation and share my illness was my own acceptance of it. I had to go through the stages of grief, essentially, grieving the life that I thought I was going to have prior to a cancer diagnosis. And of course, I'm still working through that. But when I finally got to a place where it was like, okay, we have a plan, I know what's coming next, and we're going to fight this thing, I felt a lot more hopeful than I did before. And it was easier to communicate when I was feeling motivated and hopeful for the future, because I really wasn't in a state of mind to talk to people prior to that about it without crying. So that's when I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I can share this. And I was really open about sharing with my team because I wanted them to understand where I was coming from. And I didn't want them to take anything personally. For example, one-on-ones. Those are extremely important when you're a manager, connecting with your team. Sometimes I had to move those or I wouldn't be able to make it because I wasn't well. And I didn't want my team to see that as she's bailing on us or she's checked out, she doesn't care, or I'm not a priority for this person, because their growth and success is still important to me. It's still a priority. But in that moment, during that time, it couldn't be the number one priority for me. And I wanted them to understand the why behind that. And I didn't want them to come to their own conclusions and thoughts about why or why not I was being more or less present at work.
What are some of the challenges that you faced while trying to work full-time and deal with your treatment and the symptoms from the treatment?
This is going to sound so strange. There was guilt about taking time away to do treatment. That's not normal. People should not feel guilty for taking time to focus on saving their life, fighting for their life. That's what I was doing. And I felt guilty about it. I had an arrangement with a previous employer that I would take 2 days off a month for treatment. I would go in for treatment chemo on Thursdays and Fridays, and I would take those days off. I would use the weekend to recover, and then I would work from my bed, sick and throwing up, for the next week. And for my type of chemo, it was just the 2 days. It was not required for me to be in hospital. So I would go to the hospital for a few hours, get my infusion, and then I'd be able to go home and rest after that. And so I would just sleep and I would be sick. And so that's what I did. And I would get back the following week. And like I said, I'd be off camera, or if I was comfortable enough with someone, I would just be laying down in bed talking to them. And I was pretty transparent about it because I guess part of me was trying to show people that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be your authentic self, even if it's not pretty. And I wanted that to be okay. And I think it created space for people to be vulnerable with me, to open up to me and feel comfortable saying, I'm going through this. I'm having a day. I need time. I'm not okay. And I became the person that people felt comfortable going to with that. And fortunately, I was in a leadership position where I had some power, not all the power, but some power to help them and make their life easier.
Looking back, Chevy and I would have some conversations, and I would be going through something illness related. You know, with my chronic disease, I have a lot of just sudden infections or something's happening, or my body doesn't like this, or this and that. And I remember having a conversation, why aren't you taking time off? You're going through all this and I had no idea, I always hid it at work. When I first got to my last job, I would tell no one because I didn't want to be seen as weak or a target. I still have some of that in the back of my head. So I always try to just push through and use all the energy I have during the day. And then I have nothing left for my husband or anyone else. I go from computer to the couch to the bed.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about brain fog. You kind of touched on it, and it can be challenging to have people understand what that means. It's a real thing. I've been in meetings where I can't come up with a name. It happened today. I couldn't think of the word Spotify. I got to the point where I did have conversations and said, here's what this is. I will sometimes freeze on a word, or I may be typing in the middle and taking a note and going, I can't remember how to spell that.
Yeah.
I have either pain that I'm working through, pushing through, or just the fog of the illness is active. How did you deal with that when those things were hard to hide?
There were times where I would break down and just cry. I would get off a call and I would cry and I would feel like I'm such an idiot. I've lost it. I used to be so good. I was so on it. And this is just another thing that cancer has taken away from me is I'm no longer at the top of my game. I'm no longer the quick thinker. So I definitely had those moments where I would just cry and wanted to give up. And then there were other times where, again, I was just really transparent. I would say on the call, I forgot the word, or I can't think of what I'm trying to say, or I need a minute. And sometimes I'd even just say, I've got chemo brain right now. I cannot even think of what I'm trying to say. And, I did have to adapt my style of working a little bit, which involved a lot, like I mentioned, note taking or recording, going back and rereading things, or checking in with people to make sure that I actually understood what was being said. I had to adapt. I learned to adapt, but I didn't like it. I didn't like that I had lost this thing I was really proud of being quick. And I was really proud of my knowledge and what I could bring. And I started to feel like people were passing me by because I didn't sound articulate or I couldn't find the words that I wanted to say. So I thought that there were times where people are just like, she doesn't know what she's talking about or not qualified.
You sort of alluded to this a little bit in your last answer. So I don't know if you want to expand on it or, if you felt like you answered it, that's fine. Have you experienced any stigma or misunderstandings about your illness from others in or outside of the workplace? And then if so, how did you address those challenges?
And yes, I have experienced that. And what I've noticed is there are some people who feel they know a lot about cancer. Who are not necessarily in the world of cancer, but maybe they've watched a documentary about how if you stop eating meat, that'll cure your cancer. Or if you stop eating sugar, that'll cure your cancer. Or chemo is poison and don't listen to them. You just need to exercise more and that'll cure your incurable cancer. I've definitely had people coming to me, whether it was in work or outside of work, with their holistic or natural solutions to curing cancer. And although that seems like the right fit for them and their experience, it is not the right fit for me and it's not the choice that I made. And so I just try to be upfront and honest with people about how their feedback and advice, which is 99% of the time unsolicited, is not needed in those moments, and how it can actually be quite hurtful to people when they receive that. Because if you're doing everything to fight for your life and someone says it's as easy as stop eating sugar, don't you think I would have done that? Do you think that you want to live more than I do? Do you think that you want to live more or have me live more than my son and my husband and my family wants me to live? So I think it's just some people don't recognize how tone deaf that can be. I even had a person who was a friend who found out about my diagnosis and did call and tell me to stop eating meat. And did I watch this documentary? And it said, "Don't you want to live, Chevy? Don't you want to live?" And I was in bed after a round of treatment when this call happened, and I cried. I hung up on him and I sobbed because, of course, I want to live. Of course, I'm going to do everything I can, to ensure that I'm healthy and I'm going to survive. So, yeah, it happens, and it happens in work and it happens outside of work. I think in the earlier days when people would say things to me, I was a lot more sensitive about it. And now I just say, "Oh, do you eat sugar? Because then you're going to get cancer too. Do you eat meat? Yeah, you're getting cancer too. Join the club." Because sometimes you have to match stupid with stupid.
And you have to sort of come at them at their own strategy or their own, right? With their
Yeah,
own.
exactly.
Yeah. How have you managed the pressure from others who expect you to bounce back quickly after chemo, even though you're still recovering? And do people assume that you're cured and don't understand the ongoing nature of your recovery? And then what do you wish people understood about your recovery?
I think what's really important to know is that getting a diagnosis like this changes you. You are not the same person that you were before. And often the feedback that you'll receive and the energy that you receive once you've become this different person is quite negative. And it's because through this diagnosis, I personally have found boundaries. Very exciting stuff to find boundaries when you didn't have boundaries before. And a lot of people will see your new boundaries as a personal attack on them, as you trying to make their life more difficult or you taking it out on them, when that's not the case. Just because you don't get to take advantage of me anymore does not mean that I'm trying to hurt you. It's just that I've prioritized my mental and physical well-being over everyone else's because I was a people pleaser. I was so consumed about being the best and winning and getting all the accolades and being at the top of my game on everything. And after my diagnosis, it gives you a little bit of perspective. And I think that's important for people to understand is that once you have a diagnosis, this person's different and your friendship might look different. Your relationship might look different. Your coworker might look different and act different. And that's okay. And it's finding like a happy medium with them. But if your immediate reaction is anger towards this person and their boundaries, I think you have to look at yourself and why you're feeling that way. Because shutting a laptop at 5 o'clock when the day ends is not a personal attack on someone. That's self-care. Or establishing that you're not able to, join a group or extend yourself anymore to do things outside of like your job description. That's not a personal attack. That's self-love, and that is prioritizing your well-being. So I think that's what's important is the people are not going to be the same and they have to adjust. And so do you if you want to maintain a relationship and be in their life.
How do you cope with periods of flare ups or treatments that might temporarily hinder your ability to work?
And right now, I actually just get to enjoy being in bed when I need to. So that's fantastic. Right now, I'm taking a career break just to focus on my health, which has been wonderful. But prior to that, I would say that I was not a shining example of taking space for myself when I was going through treatment. If I was to give advice to someone on that, it would be not having guilt. That was my problem, was always feeling guilty. And by prioritizing myself, I was letting everybody else down. And that's just not the case. Because if you take that time, you could actually show up better for everyone in your life, not just yourself, your kids, your partner, and your team at work. So I don't think I did a great job of that, if I'm being honest.
I'm thinking about you going through treatment and you have a career. Your health is a full time job, taking care of yourself. Your job is a full time job. Your family is a full time job. So you have like 3 or 4 full time jobs. and you need your energy for yourself to get well enough to do the other things.
Mhm.
Thinking about all of that and how you navigate all of that too.
And I think I'm very fortunate. And I know that this is not the case for everyone. So I recognize that I do have a little privilege here of having family and support. My partner he's honestly does so much for me. I sometimes feel like I am another child for him to take care of because there are times where I can go all day without eating just because I don't even think about it. And he's there bringing me water. He makes sure that I'm eating. He will come and bring me my medication when I'm supposed to take it, when I'm ignoring my alarm because I'm focused on something else. So it really is a partnership. And, when we talk about caregivers and their role, like that's a full time job. He has a full time job taking care of me. And there's a lot of guilt that I feel because he does have to take care of me in a lot of ways. But he helps a lot with me recognizing how I'm feeling and what I need in that moment because he sees it. So, for example, I'm someone who has 5 different diagnoses for anxiety. And so, if I'm starting to have an OCD flare up, he recognizes it before I even recognize it. And he'll say, "Hey, you need to calm down. Let's talk about what is stressing you out." And he almost uses logic to calm me down. He'll say, "Okay, now have you taken your pill today? No, maybe you should take your pill today to make sure that you're feeling balanced." I currently rely heavily on my partner supporting me from a personal perspective with my health. And that is definitely not the way I want it to be forever. And I know I need to take more control of my personal health and more accountability for it because he has been the caregiver for me for going on 2 years now.
In your experience and what you've gone through, like what do you think employers can do to better support their employees facing chronic health challenges?
There's a few ways I think that employers can support someone with chronic illnesses. One of them is flexible work schedules. I think companies will often say that they do have a flexible work schedule, but when someone has a chronic illness, they need real flexible. They need to know that if they don't start till 11 and they've only got 2 hours in them and they can come back to it later that night or another day, that that's going to be acceptable and it's common knowledge that this person is going to perform, but they're going to perform on their schedule. And I think that's really important because even for myself, being able to take the time away to do the treatment and then coming back and working, it would be good to know that you didn't have to be on all those meetings, that you didn't have to show up every single day at 100%. So flexible work schedule, remote work. I know there's a lot of companies that are going back to like in office and pushing that. Remote work is so critical to people who have a chronic illness. Getting up and showering and having to put on clothes and then going to an office is exhausting for some people. That's a lot. That is a full day for someone. Frankly, we don't always have the energy to do that and to show up and have to perform in person because a lot of it is performative. We have to put on the smile and act like everything's okay. We have to go, to the lunches that everyone's going to. And frankly, we just don't have the energy mentally or physically to do that. So remote work is really important. And I personally, at a previous company, saved 4 hours a day not commuting. COVID hit, I got to work from home. That was 4 extra hours a day I got to spend with my son and my husband. And that was prior to diagnosis. And so I would say remote work is important, not just for people with chronic illness, but for everyone, that option. And there are definitely people who love to be in the office and thrive. Give them that opportunity, but don't force that on people because remote work is a lifesaver for some of us. And something else I think that's really important for employers to remember, especially for those who are working remotely, is not forcing people to be on camera. I think that is something that is a little antiquated, if we can say that about, the last 4 years, but forcing people to be on camera can really affect people emotionally. There are people who might just be shy. There might be people who are not feeling physically confident in the way they're looking due to a treatment that they might have had. Forcing them to do that really is a bit of a violation to them and their privacy and their comfort level. So I think that's something else that companies should think about, is not making on-camera mandatory, because you can still contribute, you can still be successful without having to be on camera. Something else employers can do as well is look at their benefits packages and make sure that they are inclusive of all illnesses, including invisible illnesses as well. Something
And
that I think is important is short-term disability, making sure that that's a viable option for people. If someone decides to take short-term disability and they can't take the full time that they need because it's not going to pay them enough to pay their rent or their mortgage or buy groceries, that is not an effective package for them or for your company. You need to reevaluate that to make sure that you're genuinely giving people the opportunity to step back and survive and live and focus on themselves and not have to worry where day to day how they're going to pay for things and have to be forced back to work when they're not ready because they can't survive on that short-term disability.
I think a
And
lot of times people with chronic illness, we're really hard on ourselves more than we realize. We have to be kind to ourselves first.
I think it's really telling of our culture that folks with chronic illnesses need that permission to take care of themselves and to step back and step away from work. And that's the culture we're in, unfortunately, you know? So I think there needs to be a culture shift around health and well-being. That's my opinion.
You can have empathy for someone, but there becomes a point where they either lose interest or they can't empathize anymore. I'll have a conversation with someone and they'll be like, "How are you today?" I'm not good. And I wasn't good yesterday. And I won't be good probably tomorrow. This is every day. This is my reality. Some days you see it because I let you see it. And some
and
days I don't. I hide it if I'm really bad. And that's why not being on camera sometimes is our safety net.
What
and
advice would you offer to others who might be managing a chronic illness or cancer diagnosis, are working full time, and how might they advocate for themselves?
I think that's going to be different for every person and what they need. But I think the number one thing is to prioritize yourself. You're not being selfish by prioritizing yourself. And that's the bottom line. There's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. And I think that's the main thing that people need to recognize. And the people
and
that I've spoken to who do have cancer or chronic illness, they've realized that. That's what they've realized as they've gone through this is I need to stop worrying about everybody else and I need to focus on me. And that
and
includes your family. That includes their emotions and their feelings about your diagnosis as well. It is
and
not your job to manage other people's feelings about your diagnosis. It's not their experience. They are experiencing something, but it is not their experience. And I think that's really important where often people can drain a lot of energy focusing on others and how they're reacting and feeling and what they need. And you can't do that, especially when you're in this fight for your life. All of
and
your energy needs to focus on you, your mental well being, so that you're prepared mentally for what's coming for you, whether that is treatment or getting the diagnosis or the next stage of your treatment. Or it could just be something as simple as like wanting to take a nap and feeling that you're letting your partner down or you're letting your work down because you need to rest. You're not. I make a
and
joke all the time where the company that you're at survived long before you. They were a company before you were there. And when you're gone, they're still going to be there. So it doesn't matter. You're not going to make or break your company just because you're prioritizing yourself. They will survive.
What gives you strength each day?
Honestly, since my diagnosis and now being in remission for a year, which I'm very excited about, I had a laundry list of things that I want to do and experience with my son. And everything that I do in life is to create those opportunities and my husband, I should say. He's always like, you always leave me out. I'm like, well, we're a team, you're stuck with me. I don't have to stay you. But with my husband and my son creating these experiences. So we did a lot of traveling last year because we spent a year in treatment. So last year we did like a road trip across the country. We went to Banff. We saw the mountains. We did all these amazing things that I've wanted to do. And I always thought, oh, now's not the time. One day we'll do that. And so I'm really living life that one day is today. And so every day I'm doing the things that I want to do and saying yes to everything. Because, with a chronic illness, I don't know when it's going to come back, my cancer. I could have 1 year, I could have 5 years, I could have 10 years. I really don't know how much time I have. So I want to make every experience the best experience with my family.
Thank you. Great answer.
And I think with every illness, with every diagnosis and tragic thing that someone goes through in their life, there's a lesson. What has cancer taught you?
It's a great question. And I'm torn on my answer for it because part of me wants to say cancer taught me nothing. It's bullshit. And there's no benefit to cancer at all. There's nothing good about it. I didn't learn anything from this stupid disease. However, over the last couple years, I have definitely gained perspective. And that perspective is really just to focus on the things that really matter to me. That's it. The only thing that matters to me is my son, my husband, my family, seeing my friends. That's what's important to me. Everything else can come and go. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be successful in all the adventures that I go on, whether that's through work or learning kickboxing or whatever it might be. But I'm no longer in this rat race that I was in before, where I was chasing the title. I wanted to be the director by this age. I wanted to be the VP by this age. I wanted to be the CMO by this age. And a lot of my identity was wrapped up in my career. And I am so much more than my career. I have so much more to offer the world and my family than just being this person who's chasing dollar signs, essentially. And that's what I was doing. I thought, work your butt off, you'll make a ton of money, and then you'll be able to do the things that you want to do. Well, I might not be around to enjoy my retirement. I might not be alive for that. So I'm going to do all the things I want to do now and not wait until one day.
So how can we learn more about you, your podcasts, and things that you're up to next?
My podcast will be launching in February. You can find it on Instagram at Give Me Lemons Podcast. We'll also be launching a website as well, which will be givemelemons.com. And you can find out more information there. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn, trying to be more, social on there. Or you can follow my cancer journey on Instagram as well, which is at Chevstar with 3 R's.
Great.
Now we're going to do a speed round. No cancer related questions.
Oh, cancer's so fun, right?
Would you rather have the ability to talk to animals, but they only insult you, or have a personal theme song that plays everywhere you go?
Personal theme song.
Any idea what that theme song would be?
Right now, something by Chapel Roan. Pink Pony Club. That's my theme song right now.
Do you have any hidden talents or quirky skills that surprise people?
I can look at any dog breed and I know what it is. I love dogs. And so I'm very much that person that's like, oh my gosh, that's a Basenji. Because I just know every dog breed. It's a weird talent.
I don't even know what that is. If money and qualifications weren't an issue, what would your dream job be?
Marine biologist.
What or who inspires you to keep going when times are tough?
Archie, DJ Archie J, my son.
Final segment is called Question Down the Lane. We ask each guest to provide a question for the next guest. And our last guest has a question for you.
If you were a superhero, what would be your 3 superpowers?
The first one, I'd be able to breathe underwater, able to read minds, humans or animals included, and probably fly so that I could go anywhere.
Chevy? Thank you so much for sharing the hour with us. We really appreciate it. It was a really great conversation, and I'm happy to get to know you even better.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do it again.
We will.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure getting to know you, and all the best in everything you do.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share Podcetera. And be sure to follow and like the series wherever you enjoy podcasts.
For Podcetera, I'm Renee Lego.
And I'm Joelle Ludovich. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.